Imagine this. Long before the age of banks, before coins had kings' faces pressed into their soft metal, before paper was considered wealth, people still wanted to know, will I be rich? Will I be provided for? Will I always have enough? In the temples of old, where priests doubled as physicians and scribes, there was a secret, not written on papyrus, not etched into stone, but etched into you, your hand. It was believed that the Creator marked each person at birth with a map, not a map to a city or a mine, but a map to the flow of fortune through their life. And one of the most sacred markings was the prosperity line. Now, I want you to take your hand, the one you use the most, and open it gently in front of you. Let the fingers relax. Let the palm widen just enough for you to see every small detail. Notice the main lines first, the lifeline, the heart line, the headline. Those are the highways. Everyone talks about those, but I'm here to guide you to a smaller road, one most people overlook. It's a line that can run straight up from the base of your palm toward your middle finger, sometimes splitting, sometimes merging with other lines, sometimes faint, but always present in some form. This is your prosperity line. And here's the truth the ancients knew. The prosperity line is never truly alone. If you look closer, you'll see minor connected lines branching from it, like small tributaries feeding a river. These little branches matter. They represent opportunities, inheritances, unexpected sources of help, the side doors through which wealth can flow. Pause. Look at yours. Is the line deep and unbroken? That's a sign of steady growth. Does it have forks that rise upward? That's expansion. Multiple sources of abundance. Are there fine diagonal marks crossing it? Those are challenges you've overcome, and each time you did, the river got stronger. Now, before we go deeper, I want you to do something simple, but powerful. If you want more insights like this, subscribe now and join this growing circle of seekers. And when you do, leave a comment telling me whether your prosperity line is long, short, or somewhere in between. Your own hand might surprise you. Because here's the thing, the prosperity line is not fixed in meaning. Yes, a line itself is set in your palm, but how it activates depends on you. In ancient readings, the priests would say, the line is the path. The choices are the journey. If your line has small upward branches, those are moments where your choices can open new gates of wealth. But if you ignore them, they become dormant, faint, barely visible. If your line has a deep base, that's a sign of strong foundational fortune, often tied to family blessings, ancestral merit, or early life opportunities. And the ancients believed something fascinating, that prayer, ritual, and alignment could awaken even a faint prosperity line. It was said that if a person lived with gratitude, gave generously, and kept their speech free of envy and bitterness, the prosperity line would darken over the years, becoming more defined, as if the palm itself was recording their alignment with abundance. Some prosperity lines are bold and uninterrupted, almost like a clean highway running through the palm. This is often a sign of a person who meets their opportunities head-on and rarely delays decisions once the right door appears. These people tend to have a steady relationship with money, not without challenges, but without long seasons of lack. Others have a prosperity line that begins faint and becomes darker toward the top. That usually points to a late bloomer, someone whose wealth and success become more visible in midlife or later. In the ancient temples, These hands were considered blessed for longevity in abundance, meaning the fortune might come later, but it would last longer. Then there's the broken prosperity line. A few visible segments instead of one unbroken streak. The old readers would tell you, this doesn't mean failure, it means transition. Each break represents a major life shift, sometimes a career change, relocation, or reinvention. And here's the encouraging truth. A break can lead to an even stronger section afterward. Just like a river might disappear underground, only to resurface wider and more powerful downstream. Look closely at your own hand. Do you see small, vertical lines feeding into your prosperity line from the sides? Those are called feeder lines, and they were considered lucky. They mean help is coming in from unexpected directions, a friend's connection, a stranger's generosity, a windfall you never saw coming. And then, the minor connected lines, the thin, sometimes barely visible paths that touch or run parallel to the main prosperity line. The ancients treated these like whispered prophecies, small doors that lead to big halls. Many believe that these fine marks appear or grow deeper when a person changes their spiritual alignment. Maybe they forgive someone they've held resentment toward. Maybe they start blessing their money instead of worrying about it. Maybe they give without expecting return. Here's a simple practice you can try today. Once a day, run the tip of your finger along your prosperity line, gently, slowly. And as you do, say, "This path is blessed. Wealth flows here freely. I welcome every gift, every source, every stream." This may seem symbolic, but it's an act of agreement between your mind and your body, a way to imprint abundance into your daily awareness. If you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the next ancient prosperity teachings we're uncovering here. And tell me in the comments whether your line has these feeder marks or branches. I read every one, because in truth, the prosperity line is more than a prediction. It's a mirror. It shows how open you are to receiving, how willing you are to adapt, and how ready you are to follow the call when it comes. Some prosperity lines don't stand alone. In rare palms, you'll see a second, lighter line running almost parallel to the main one. This is called the double prosperity line, and ancient readers treated it as a mark of two fortunes. Sometimes it meant the person would have more than one major career or wealth source in their life. Other times, it pointed to an inheritance on top of personal earnings, or two separate ventures, both bringing abundance. If you have this, it's as if the universe is saying, you won't have to rely on just one river. Another fascinating variation is the intersecting prosperity line, where another strong line crosses it at some point along its path. The old masters interpreted this as a destiny meeting. A person, a partnership, or an event will cross your path and permanently alter the direction of your wealth journey. Sometimes, the intersection happens early in the line, signaling an early turning point. Sometimes, it's near the end, meaning the game-changing moment is still ahead. Then there's the elusive ladder pattern. Tiny horizontal lines stacked like rungs across the prosperity line. The ladder was considered a mark of steady climbing, often meaning that the person would reach financial success step by step, rather than in one big leap. This pattern often showed up in hands of merchants, builders, and artisans, people whose prosperity grew with consistent effort and skill. And finally, an incredibly rare sign, a forked ending on the prosperity line. where it splits into two near the top. In palmistry, this was seen as divided blessings, often meaning that your success will branch into two equally abundant paths. It could be a thriving business alongside a creative passion, or wealth in both material and spiritual forms. These patterns were never read in isolation. The old palmists would run their eyes over the whole hand, noting which mounts were full, which fingers curved, which skin textures hinted at certain traits. But the prosperity line was always a central pillar, a silent record of how a person interacts with opportunity, risk, and reward. If you're fascinated by this, make sure you've subscribed, because in our next ancient reading, we'll uncover what the absence of a prosperity line really means, and how the old reader said you could still write it in. And if you've seen any of these rare patterns in your own palm, tell me in the comments. I'm curious how they've shown up in your life so far, because in the end, these markings aren't set in stone. They're alive. They shift as you do. They grow as you grow. They deepen as you decide you are ready for more. The starting point of the prosperity line is just as revealing as the line itself. If your prosperity line begins low on the palm, near the base of the lifeline, it's a sign the old masters read as early awareness. You were likely conscious of money, responsibility, or opportunity from a young age. This doesn't always mean wealth was present, but it does mean the instinct to build and manage resources awakened early. People with this start often say they always knew they'd do something big. They might have begun side hustles before adulthood, saved coins instead of spending them, or been the one in their family who thought in terms of future rather than now. A mid-palm start, right around the heart line, was read as the midlife bloom. In this pattern, prosperity energy doesn't truly ignite until the emotional lessons of life have been lived. These are the people who might have had ordinary jobs in their 20s and 30s, but then, after a relationship shift, a spiritual awakening, or a career change, suddenly found themselves on a steep upward climb. In ancient times, readers would encourage mid-start palms to focus on learning skills and building networks early on, because their big opportunities would come later, and they'd need to be ready. A high start, up near the headline or even the mount below the index finger, was called the sudden rise. This indicated that wealth would arrive almost unexpectedly, often through one major deal, windfall, or turning point. In some readings, this was tied to inheritance. In others, it was the mark of a bold, late-in-life leap that paid off beyond expectation. The old wisdom was clear. If you carry a high start line, you must train your heart and mind to be ready to hold the blessing when it arrives, because it may come all at once. And here's the beautiful part. No starting point is better than another. They simply mark different seasons in which your harvest will ripen. What matters most is knowing your season and tending to the seeds in the meantime. So tell me in the comments, where does your prosperity line begin? Near the base, mid-palm, or high up? Your answer might inspire someone else to see their own palm in a new light. And if you're feeling the energy in this teaching, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss the next reading. The ancients said that the depth and clarity of your prosperity line could whisper just as loudly as its position. A deep, bold, and unbroken line was called the steady river. This was said to mark a life where financial flow moves with dependable strength, even if there are storms in the world outside. Such a palm was a sign that the person had either been born into strong generational stability or had built unshakable inner wealth patterns early on. In both cases, the flow didn't easily dry up. Readers often told these people, "You will not know famine, but you must remember to share your bread." A light or faint prosperity line was seen as the hidden stream. The old masters never read this as a curse. Rather, it was an untapped channel. It meant wealth could be drawn in, but would require conscious effort, alignment, and sometimes the clearing of old fears. People with faint lines were told to feed the stream, to bless their work, speak prosperity daily, and take visible, faith-driven actions. With time, the faint line could deepen. If the line was deep in some places and light in others, it was called the interrupted journey. In the ancient view, this meant the person might experience seasons of feast, followed by seasons of lean, not due to luck, but to cycles in belief, discipline, or focus. Each break in depth was an invitation to notice what had shifted in one's mindset or habits and restore alignment before the next season began. And then there was the rare, etched, almost carved looking line, which some called the mark of the merchant. This was believed to belong to those with a destiny of great influence in commerce, trade, or wealth distribution. But it carried a warning. The greater the line, the greater the responsibility to keep one's heart clean. So look at your own hand under the light. Does your prosperity line speak of a steady river, a hidden stream, an interrupted journey, or the mark of the merchant? Share your answer in the comments, not just for yourself, but so others may learn from the many shapes of this path. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you're here for the next layer of this reading, because the minor connected lines may hold the real secrets you've been missing. The ancients said that the depth and clarity of your prosperity line could whisper just as loudly as its position. A deep, bold, and unbroken line was called the steady river. This was said to mark a life where financial flow moves with dependable strength, even if there are storms in the world outside. Such a palm was a sign that the person had either been born into strong generational stability or had built unshakable inner wealth patterns early on. In both cases, the flow didn't easily dry up. Readers often told these people, "You will not know famine, but you must remember to share your bread." A light or faint prosperity line was seen as the hidden stream. The old masters never read this as a curse. Rather, it was an untapped channel. It meant wealth could be drawn in, but would require conscious effort, alignment, and sometimes the clearing of old fears. People with faint lines were told to feed the stream, to bless their work, speak prosperity daily, and take visible, faith-driven actions. With time, the faint line could deepen. If the line was deep in some places and light in others, it was called the interrupted journey. In the ancient view, this meant the person might experience seasons of feast, followed by seasons of lean, not due to luck, but to cycles in belief, discipline, or focus. Each break in depth was an invitation to notice what had shifted in one's mindset or habits and restore alignment before the next season began. And then there was the rare, etched, almost carved looking line, which some called the mark of the merchant. This was believed to belong to those with a destiny of great influence in commerce, trade, or wealth distribution. But it carried a warning. The greater the line, the greater the responsibility to keep one's heart clean. So look at your own hand under the light. Does your prosperity line speak of a steady river, a hidden stream, an interrupted journey, or the mark of the merchant? Share your answer in the comments, not just for yourself, but so others may learn from the many shapes of this path. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you're here for the next layer of this reading, because the minor connected lines may hold the real secrets you've been missing. In ancient palmistry, certain rare markings and symbols appearing along or near the prosperity line were seen as direct divine messages, almost like signatures from the unseen world, confirming that wealth was on its way. A star on the prosperity line was considered one of the most powerful omens. It symbolized sudden, almost miraculous gain, a windfall, inheritance, or an unexpected success that seemed to defy logic. The teaching was, when the star appears, be ready to receive without guilt, because it is grace, not wages. A triangle intersecting the prosperity line was the seal of wisdom. This indicated wealth gained through learning, study, or deep skill mastery. Those with this mark were told to invest in their own growth, for their fortune would come through what they knew, not merely what they did. A square was known as the fortress. It was said to shield a person from financial disaster. Even in times when they might make mistakes, money might slow, but it would not vanish. It was a divine protection clause in their destiny. A circle was the portal. It often suggested a pivotal event, a single opportunity that, if embraced, could change the person's financial path permanently. The circle warned, do not miss the doorway when it opens. A trident sprouting from the end of the prosperity line was the mark of threefold blessing. This was believed to bring not just wealth, but influence and legacy, abundance that extended beyond one's own lifetime. And perhaps the rarest of all, a tiny fish symbol lying on the prosperity line was called the sacred catch. In Vedic palmistry, this was a divine sign of spiritual wealth flowing into material form. It was said that the person's prosperity would always come with purpose, blessing others as much as themselves. These symbols were never seen as accidents. The ancients taught that just as the lines shift over a lifetime, the presence of such markings meant your destiny was in motion. They could fade, change, or grow stronger, depending on how you aligned your actions, faith, and gratitude.